I never expected a wrong turn to turn me into the most talked about person in a town I didn't even know existed. If you'd told me a month earlier that complete strangers would be stopping me on the street just to shake my hand, I'd have laughed in your face. I wasn't the kind of guy who attracted attention. I worked remotely as a freelance photographer, spent most of my days editing pictures in sweatpants, and preferred quiet weekends over crowded bars. My name's John, and for 27 years, being invisible suited me just fine. That all changed because my GPS lost signal. I was driving through the mountains on my way to photograph an old lighthouse for a travel magazine. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills and gave me an excuse to explore places most people ignored. Halfway there, dark clouds rolled in. Rain started pouring so hard that I could barely see the road ahead. My phone kept recalculating before finally giving up altogether. No signal. Perfect. I sighed, slowed down, and took what looked like the only road that wasn't flooded. About 20 minutes later, I spotted a weathered wooden sign. Welcome to Maple Falls Population. 2,184. I'd never heard of it. The town looked frozen in time. Brick storefronts lined the main street. Flower baskets hung from old-fashioned lampposts. There wasn't a single chain restaurant or supermarket in sight. People actually smiled at each other as they walked by. It felt different. I figured I'd stop for coffee while waiting for the storm to pass. The cafe was called Miller's Corner, and the smell of fresh cinnamon rolls hit me the second I walked inside. Every conversation stopped. For a split second, 20 pairs of eyes looked at me. Then everything went back to normal. I ordered a black coffee and found a table near the window. 5 minutes later, someone cleared his throat beside me. Mind if I sit? I looked up. The guy standing there was easily 6'2", broad shoulders filling out a dark green flannel shirt. His sandy blonde hair looked like he'd run his fingers through it instead of using a comb, and he wore the kind of relaxed smile that instantly made people feel comfortable. "I'm Oscar," he said, holding out a hand. "You definitely aren't from around here." I laughed. "Was it that obvious? You looked at the parking meter for 2 full minutes." I was trying to figure out if it still worked. Oscar grinned. "It doesn't. Hasn't worked in 3 years." I shook his hand. "I'm John." "Passing through?" That was the plan. He glanced toward the rain hammering against the windows. "Not today, it isn't." Outside, the storm had only gotten worse. Tree branches bent violently in the wind, and water rushed down the streets like tiny rivers. "You got somewhere to stay?" Oscar asked. I figured I'd drive once it calmed down. He looked outside again. "You might be waiting until tomorrow." I followed his gaze. Honestly, he was probably right. Before I could answer, the cafe owner shouted from behind the counter, "Oscar!" "Yeah? Can you help me move the delivery boxes before they get soaked?" Oscar nodded. "Be right there." He turned back to me. "Don't disappear." I wasn't planning to. "Good." He flashed another easy smile before heading outside through the back door. I watched him lift boxes that looked far heavier than they had any right to be. The guy made it look effortless. I caught myself staring. "Careful." I looked over. An older woman at the next table smiled knowingly. People tend to do that. What? Stare at Oscar. I nearly choked on my coffee. "I wasn't." She laughed. "Honey, everyone does." Great. Apparently, I wasn't as subtle as I thought. About half an hour later, my phone buzzed. No signal again. Then the cafe lights flickered. Once, twice. Everything went dark. A chorus of groans filled the room. "Power's out again," someone muttered. The owner sighed dramatically. "Third time this month." Oscar came back inside, dripping wet. "Transformer?" "Probably." He noticed me sitting by the window. "You okay?" "Yeah." He looked around the dark cafe. "Actually, maybe you can help." With what? He pointed toward the old community center across the street. We've got a charity festival tomorrow. Half the decorations aren't finished because the volunteers are short-handed. I blinked. You want a complete stranger to help? Oscar shrugged. You've got two hands. I suppose I do. And judging by that camera bag. He nodded toward my backpack. You're probably creative. I smiled despite myself. That's a dangerous assumption. Come on. I don't even live here. You don't have to. There was something oddly convincing about the way he said it. Maybe it was because everyone else in the cafe suddenly looked hopeful. Maybe it was because I had nowhere else to be. Or maybe it was because Oscar's smile made saying no feel impossible. Fine, I said. I'll help. The entire cafe broke into applause. I stared at them. You'd think I just agreed to save the town? Oscar laughed. You have absolutely no idea what you just signed up for. At the time, I thought he meant decorating a community hall. I had no clue that by the end of the weekend, the entire town would know my name. And somehow, so would thousands of people far beyond Maple Falls. The next morning, I realized I'd made a terrible mistake. Not because I'd agreed to help, because everyone in Maple Falls apparently woke up before sunrise. At exactly 7:30, someone knocked on the door of the tiny bed and breakfast where I'd spent the night. I opened it, still half asleep. Oscar stood there holding 2 coffees. You look exhausted. You realize normal people sleep in on Saturdays? He raised an eyebrow. Normal people. Exactly. And yet you're wearing 2 different socks. I looked down. He was right. I choose to believe that's fashion. Oscar laughed. I like your confidence. He handed me one of the coffees. Come on, we got work to do. The community center looked completely different in daylight. Dozens of volunteers hurried around carrying tables, hanging banners, and setting up food stalls. Children ran through the parking lot chasing each other while older couples argued about where flower pots should go. It felt less like preparing for a festival and more like preparing for a family reunion. The second Oscar and I walked in, people started waving. Morning, Oscar. Who's your friend? Is that the photographer? I frowned. The photographer? Oscar looked guilty. I might have mentioned you. To who? He scratched the back of his neck. Everyone. I stared at him. You've known me for less than 24 hours. I know. So why does the entire town know what I do? He shrugged. It's a small town. Apparently, news traveled faster than the internet around here. Within an hour, I found myself taking promotional photos for the festival. Kids holding balloons, the local bakery arranging pastries, the high school band practicing in the square. Every time I lowered my camera, someone else wanted a picture. Can you get one of us? What about our stand? My grandson's visiting. I couldn't remember the last time people had been this excited to have their picture taken. Most clients complained. These people thanked me before I even pressed the shutter. It was refreshing. Oscar watched from across the square while helping assemble a wooden stage. You smile more when you're working? I glanced up. I do? Yeah. I've never noticed. I have. Something about the way he said it made me hesitate for a second. Then someone called my name again. John, over here. I turned. 3 elderly women stood beside a pie competition table. One of them adjusted her apron. We need our official picture. I smiled. I'm coming. Oscar chuckled behind me. I think you've been adopted. Around lunchtime, I finally sat down. My feet were killing me. Oscar dropped onto the bench beside me with 2 paper plates piled high with barbecue. You earned this. I took pictures. You also fixed the banner? It was upside down. You organized the raffle tickets. Nobody could find them. You carried chairs. There weren't enough volunteers. Oscar smirked. So basically, I got tricked into working. You absolutely did. I laughed. I should have seen that coming. You really should have. For a while, we simply ate in comfortable silence. Then Oscar looked toward the town square. You know? What? I haven't seen this many people smiling in a while. I followed his gaze. Families laughed together. Teenagers helped younger kids decorate bicycles. Even the grumpy-looking mechanic I'd seen earlier was dancing with his granddaughter. It's a nice town, I admitted. It has its moments. You sound surprised. Oscar leaned back. Small towns aren't always easy. No? Everyone knows everyone. That sounds nice. Until they know everything. There was something behind those words, something heavier. Before I could ask what he meant, a loud voice interrupted us. Oscar! A woman hurried toward us carrying a clipboard. We've got a problem. Oscar stood immediately. What happened? The mayor's speech starts in 2 hours? Okay. The promotional posters never arrived. He frowned. What? The printing company mixed up the delivery? She looked ready to cry. We've got nothing to advertise today's events. Oscar looked at me, then at my camera bag, then back at me. I already knew what he was about to ask. No. You don't even know what I'm going to say. I do. Please? Oscar. Pretty please? I sighed dramatically. How many posters? 20. That's not 20. He smiled sheepishly. Maybe 50? I covered my face. I came here for coffee. And now you're saving the festival. I walked right into that one. For the next 3 hours, I designed posters on my laptop, while volunteers ran between the library and the local print shop. It wasn't anything fancy, just colorful schedules, maps, and event announcements. But when we finished hanging them around town, people applauded. Actually applauded. The mayor himself shook my hand. Young man, you've done this town a great service. It was really nothing. Nonsense. He pointed proudly toward the main street. Look at that. People stopped to read the posters. Parents took photos beside them. Kids used them to plan which games they wanted to visit first. I felt strangely proud. Oscar leaned close enough that only I could hear him. Told you? Told me what? You'd fit in here. I looked around. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about deadlines, or clients, or emails. I was just happy. That evening, the festival officially opened. Music echoed across the square. Food stands filled the air with incredible smells. String lights illuminated every building. It looked magical. I wandered through the crowd taking candid photos. Nobody posed anymore. People simply enjoyed themselves. Those always made the best pictures. As I lowered my camera, I noticed Oscar watching me again. What? He smiled. Nothing. You keep doing that. Doing what? Looking at me. He laughed softly. I was thinking. About? You showed up here by accident. Technically. And somehow, in one day, he gestured toward the busy square. Everyone knows your name. Almost as if the town wanted to prove his point, someone shouted across the street, John. Another voice joined in. Hey, photographer. A little girl ran over holding a cotton candy bigger than her head. Mr. John, Mom says thank you for the family pictures. I smiled. You're welcome. She waved before running off again. Oscar folded his arms. You see? I shook my head in disbelief. This town is unbelievable. He grinned. You haven't seen anything yet. What do you mean? Instead of answering, he looked toward the stage in the center of the square, where the mayor had just stepped up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, the mayor announced, smiling broadly. Before tonight's fireworks, we have one special surprise. Oscar's expression suddenly changed. Oh? What? I forgot they were doing this. Doing what? The mayor continued. We'd like to recognize the visitor who worked harder than anyone expected. My stomach dropped. Oh no. John. The entire town turned toward me, and then everyone started clapping. I wanted the ground to open up and swallow me whole. I've never liked being the center of attention, so naturally, I found myself standing on a stage in front of more than 2,000 people. The applause just kept going. I glanced at Oscar. You could have warned me. I honestly forgot. You forgot the entire town was about to embarrass me? He rubbed the back of his neck. Maybe. I don't believe you. He laughed. Yeah, that's fair. The mayor waved me over. Come on, John. I took a deep breath and climbed the steps. Every eye in Maple Falls seemed to be on me. The mayor handed me a small wooden plaque with the town's logo carved into it. We don't usually honor visitors, he said into the microphone. But sometimes a stranger reminds us what community really looks like. The crowd applauded again. I felt my face burning. I honestly don't know what to say. A voice from the audience shouted, Say you'll come back. Laughter rippled through the square. I smiled awkwardly. I only helped because everyone here made me feel welcome. Someone else yelled, That's enough for us. More applause. The mayor shook my hand. Thank you, son. As I stepped off the stage, Oscar was waiting with the biggest grin I'd seen yet. You survived. Barely. You looked terrified. I was terrified. He laughed so hard he had to wipe tears from his eyes. I wish you'd seen your face. I'm never forgiving you. You will. No. You definitely will. I rolled my eyes. We'll see. An hour later, the fireworks began. People spread blankets across the grass surrounding the town square. Families sat together. Kids pointed excitedly at the sky. Oscar and I ended up near the old fountain with 2 cups of hot chocolate. I didn't expect fireworks. We celebrate Founders Festival every year. It's beautiful. He looked at me instead of the sky. I wasn't talking about the fireworks. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then the first explosion lit up the night. Brilliant blue, followed by gold. Everyone around us gasped. I looked up just as another burst illuminated Oscar's face. He wasn't watching the fireworks anymore. He was watching me. It made my stomach do something unfamiliar. So? I said quietly. So? You really grew up here? My whole life. Ever wanted to leave? Oscar thought for a moment. When I was younger. What changed? He smiled faintly. I realized home isn't boring. No? No. He looked around the square. It's the people that make it worth staying. I followed his gaze. Everywhere I looked, neighbors laughed together. Teenagers helped elderly couples carry chairs. Even after only 2 days, it somehow felt genuine. I think I'm starting to understand. Oscar smiled. I was hoping you would. The next morning, my phone finally found a signal. It immediately exploded with notifications. 32 emails, 12 missed calls, messages from clients. Nothing unusual. Until I opened social media. I frowned. What? Oscar looked up from his breakfast. Everything okay? I don't think so. What happened? I turned my phone around. One of the festival volunteers had uploaded a photo. Not of the festival, of me. I was kneeling beside a little boy, showing him how to use my camera while both of us laughed. The caption read, A stranger came to Maple Falls and reminded us kindness still exists. Below it, 43,000 likes. Oscar blinked. Huh? I've never seen numbers that big. I refreshed the page. 51,000. Then 58. Comments poured in faster than I could read them. Where is this town? This restored my faith in humanity. Who is the photographer? These people seem so wholesome. Another notification popped up, then another, and another. People had started sharing the post. National travel pages, photography groups, local news accounts. I looked at Oscar. I think something weird is happening. By noon, something definitely weird was happening. Cars started arriving from neighboring towns, not for the festival, for me. At first, it was only a few people, then dozens. Someone recognized me while I was helping clean up decorations. You're the guy from the post. I smiled politely. I guess so. Can we get a picture together? I blinked. A picture? My daughter loved your story. Before I could answer, someone else approached. Excuse me, are you John? Then another. Then another. Within 15 minutes, I had accidentally formed a line. Oscar stared from across the square. I think you're famous. I'm absolutely not famous. A teenager walked over holding a notebook. Would you sign this? I looked around helplessly. Oscar couldn't stop laughing. This is your fault. My fault? You introduced me to everyone. I introduced you to like 6 people. Apparently, that was enough. Things only got stranger. The local newspaper asked for an interview. A regional TV station arrived before dinner. The mayor insisted I stand beside him during another speech. Everywhere I went, people smiled, waved, called my name. It didn't feel like celebrity. It felt personal, as if everyone genuinely wanted to know me. Late that evening, Oscar and I escaped to the quiet river behind town. Finally, silence. He skipped a stone across the water. You holding up? I think so. You've looked overwhelmed all day? I don't understand any of this. Oscar nodded. I do. You do? He sat on the old wooden dock. This town needed something hopeful. And? You showed up. I just took pictures. You listened to people? I was being polite. You remembered names. I shrugged. That's normal. Oscar smiled. Not as normal as you think. The breeze carried the scent of pine trees across the water. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then Oscar broke the silence. So? When are you leaving? The question hit harder than I expected. I don't know. You don't? My assignment can wait another day. Oscar looked down at the lake, trying and failing to hide his smile. I was hoping you'd say that. I looked at him. Really looked. The easy smile. The quiet confidence. The way he cared about everyone in town without asking for anything in return. Maybe. Just maybe. The reason I wasn't in a hurry to leave had less to do with Maple Falls and more to do with the man sitting beside me. Neither of us said it. Not yet. But I had a feeling we were both starting to realize it. The next morning, I woke up to my phone vibrating nonstop. I groaned and reached for it without opening my eyes. 37 new notifications. Then 62. By the time I sat up in bed, there were over 100. What now? I muttered. I opened the first message. Unknown number. Hi, John. We drove here from 2 towns over. We'd love to meet you if you're still in Maple Falls. The second was from a travel blog asking to use one of the festival photos. The third came from a magazine editor I'd worked with once. Whatever you're doing in Maple Falls, keep doing it. Everyone's talking about it. I blinked at the screen. Seriously? Downstairs, the bed and breakfast dining room was unusually crowded, not with guests, with reporters. The owner, Mrs. Jenkins, spotted me the second I walked in. There he is. Every head turned. Microphones appeared. Cameras followed. I stopped walking. Oscar chose that exact moment to step through the front door carrying breakfast sandwiches. He looked from me to the reporters, then sighed dramatically. "I leave you alone for 10 minutes. This wasn't my idea. A woman holding a microphone hurried over. "John, would you mind answering a few questions?" Oscar stepped beside me. "One interview." I looked at him. "One?" He nodded. "Otherwise, they'll stay here all day." Fair point. 20 minutes later, I found myself sitting on the cafe patio with a local television crew. The interviewer smiled warmly. "So, John, what made you fall in love with Maple Falls?" I laughed awkwardly. "I've only been here 3 days." "And yet you've become the face of the town." "I don't think that's true." She held up her phone. The original festival post had passed 3 million views. 3 million. I stared at the number. "That's a lot?" I was going to say terrifying. She laughed. "What do you think people are responding to?" I thought about it for a moment. The people. Meaning? They actually care about each other. I glanced toward the bakery across the street. The owner was carrying fresh bread to an elderly neighbor. Nobody seemed to think it was unusual. It reminded me that kindness doesn't have to be complicated. The interviewer smiled. "I think that's exactly why everyone connected with your story." By lunchtime, the streets were busier than anyone could remember. Visitors wandered through town taking pictures. The bakery had completely sold out. The souvenir shop printed extra t-shirts that simply said, "I found Maple Falls." Oscar walked beside me, shaking his head. "This place has never looked like this." "Do you think it'll last?" "I have no idea." The hardware store owner rushed toward us. "Oscar!" "What happened?" "We're out of parking spaces." Oscar blinked. That's a sentence I've never heard before. The mayor called an emergency town meeting that afternoon. Not because anything was wrong, because business owners couldn't believe what was happening. "We've had more visitors today," one restaurant owner announced, "than we usually get in 2 months." "Our gift shop nearly emptied," someone else added. "The motel's fully booked," another voice called. Everyone looked at me. I immediately raised both hands. "I honestly don't know how this happened." The mayor smiled. "Maybe not. But your story reminded people that places like Maple Falls still exist." Oscar leaned toward me. "You accidentally became our tourism campaign." I should probably apologize. He laughed quietly. "I don't think anyone wants an apology." Later that evening, Oscar offered to show me his favorite place outside town. We drove 10 minutes along a winding country road before stopping near an old hill overlooking the valley. The entire town stretched below us. Tiny lights glowed against the fading sunset. "It's beautiful," I whispered. "Told you." We sat on the hood of his truck with paper cups of coffee. For the first time all day. Nobody recognized me. Nobody interrupted us. It felt peaceful. Oscar broke the silence. "You know what surprised me?" "What?" "You never acted like you were better than anyone." I frowned. "Why would I?" "A lot of people would." "I don't see the point." He smiled softly. "I figured." The breeze lifted his hair. He looked out across the valley before speaking again. "I almost left Maple Falls 3 years ago." "You did?" "I had a job offer in Chicago." "What happened?" "My dad got sick." "I'm sorry." "He recovered." Oscar smiled faintly. "But staying here changed me." He picked up a small stone and rolled it between his fingers. "I realized success isn't always measured by how far you go." I listened quietly. "Sometimes it's about who you're there for." His words lingered in the evening air. "They're lucky to have you?" He looked at me. "I've been thinking the same thing about you." The drive back to town was comfortable. Neither of us felt the need to fill every silence. When we reached the square, most of the visitors had gone home. Maple Falls finally felt like itself again. Oscar parked beside the fountain. "You hungry?" "Always." "Diner?" "You've convinced me." Inside, only a few booths were occupied. The waitress smiled. "The usual, Oscar?" "You know it." She turned to me. "And for our honorary local?" I laughed. I guess I'm getting used to hearing that. As we waited for our food, an elderly man approached our table. "Mind if I say something?" "Of course." He looked directly at me. "My wife passed away last year." "I'm sorry." I hadn't smiled much since then. He held up his phone. "My granddaughter showed me those pictures you took." He paused for a moment. "They reminded me that there's still good in the world." I didn't know what to say. He simply squeezed my shoulder. "Thank you." Then he quietly walked away. I stared after him. Oscar didn't speak immediately. Finally, he said quietly, "Now you understand." I nodded slowly. It was never about becoming famous. No, it was about giving people hope. Oscar smiled. Exactly. For the first time since all of this started. I realized he was right. The attention, the interviews, the headlines, none of that actually mattered. The only thing that mattered was the people whose lives had been touched along the way. And somehow, one of those people had quietly become the most important to me. Oscar. The next morning, I planned to leave. Really. My camera was packed. My laptop was in my backpack. The lighthouse assignment I'd almost forgotten about was still waiting. I even loaded my suitcase into the car. Then Mrs. Jenkins, the owner of the bed and breakfast, walked outside holding an envelope. "This came for you." "For me?" She nodded. There wasn't even a stamp. Someone dropped it off. I opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. "Before you leave, come to the town hall at 10. Please. Oscar." I checked my watch. 9:32. I sighed. So much for leaving on time. When I arrived at the town hall, the parking lot was strangely full. I stepped inside. The large meeting room was packed. Every seat was occupied. The mayor stood at the front beside Oscar. The moment people noticed me, they applauded. Again. I covered my face. "You've all got to stop doing that." Laughter filled the room. The mayor smiled. "John, would you come up here?" I looked at Oscar. He simply shrugged with an innocent expression that wasn't innocent at all. "You knew." "Maybe. I'm starting to notice a pattern. I've been told I'm bad at keeping surprises." The room laughed again. I walked to the front. The mayor cleared his throat. "When John arrived here 4 days ago, none of us expected what would happen." He gestured toward the windows overlooking Main Street. "Our restaurants are full. Our stores have welcomed new customers. Our town has been seen by millions of people." He paused. "But that isn't why we're grateful." The room became quiet. "You reminded us to appreciate what we already had." He reached into a folder. "So, the town council voted unanimously." I frowned. "Voted?" Oscar looked suspiciously amused. The mayor handed me a framed certificate. It read, "Honorary Citizen of Maple Falls." My jaw actually dropped. "You can't be serious." "Oh, we're very serious." The entire room stood and applauded. I looked at Oscar. "I've been here less than a week." He grinned. "Fastest record we've ever had." There are records? There are now. After the meeting, people slowly filtered outside. The square buzzed with its usual quiet rhythm. Oscar leaned against the steps. So? You still leaving today?" I looked toward my car, then back at him. "I honestly don't know anymore." His smile faded into something softer. I was hoping you'd say that. We spent the afternoon walking through town without any schedule. For the first time since I'd arrived, neither of us had anything to do. No interviews, no festival, no reporters, just us. Oscar pointed toward a narrow path behind the church. Ever been down there? No. Come on. The trail led through tall pine trees before opening into a quiet meadow overlooking a small lake. There was an old wooden swing hanging from a massive oak tree. You built this? When I was 16? It's still standing. Barely. I sat on the swing. It creaked dramatically. I think it just insulted me. Oscar laughed. It does that. You spend a lot of time here? When I need to think. He sat beside me on the grass. My mom used to bring me here. I looked over. You were close? The closest? His smile became nostalgic. She always said this place reminded people to slow down. I watched the breeze ripple across the lake. I think she would have liked you. The words caught me off guard. You think so? Oscar nodded without hesitation. I know so. For some reason, that meant more than I expected. As the afternoon faded into evening, we walked back toward town. Halfway there, Oscar finally asked the question I'd been quietly expecting. Can I ask you something? Sure. What were you running from? I looked at him. What makes you think I was running? He smiled gently. Because people don't usually drive 6 hours into the mountains by accident. I sighed. You notice too much. I try. For a while, I didn't answer. Finally, I built my whole life around work. Oscar listened without interrupting. I kept telling myself I'd slow down someday. And someday never came. I laughed quietly. I couldn't remember the last time I enjoyed a week without checking emails every 5 minutes. Oscar nodded slowly. I know that feeling. Coming here, I looked around Main Street. Felt like somebody hit the pause button. We stopped outside Miller's Corner, the cafe where we'd first met. I didn't realize how tired I was. Oscar looked at me for a long moment. Maybe that's why you found us. That night, the town organized an outdoor movie in the park. Nothing fancy, just an old projector and folding chairs. Families brought blankets. Kids chased fireflies. Oscar and I shared a bag of popcorn. Halfway through the movie, my phone buzzed. A message from a publishing company. We'd like to discuss a photo book about Maple Falls. Please call us. I stared at it. Oscar noticed. Good news? I think so. What is it? I showed him the message. He read it twice. A book? They want my photographs. John. He looked genuinely excited. That's incredible. I smiled. It could be. Then another message arrived. A travel network wanted to license my festival pictures. Then another. A photography podcast invited me for an interview. I looked at the growing list of notifications. Everything I'd been working toward for years was suddenly happening. Because of this town. Because of one wrong turn. Oscar nudged my shoulder. I told you. Told me what? Sometimes getting lost is exactly what you're supposed to do. I looked at him. The movie continued in the background. Children laughed somewhere behind us. The stars stretched across the clear night sky. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about the future. I was thinking about the present and the man sitting beside me. Because somewhere between the festival, the interviews, the long conversations, and the quiet walks, I'd stopped wondering whether I wanted to stay in Maple Falls. I'd started wondering whether Oscar felt the same way I did. The next morning, I woke before my alarm. For the first time in years, I didn't immediately reach for my phone. Instead, I opened the curtains. Main Street was already coming to life. The florist was arranging fresh flowers outside her shop. The bakery had a line stretching onto the sidewalk. A few tourists wandered around with cameras, comparing the festival photos they'd seen online to the places in front of them. Maple Falls had changed, not dramatically, just enough that you could feel it. I smiled. Then my phone buzzed. Reality returned all at once. The publishing company wanted a video meeting. A travel network wanted exclusive rights to several photographs. 3 different magazines asked if I'd consider writing about my experience. One message stood out. We'd like to feature both your photography and the story behind Maple Falls. I read it twice, then a third time. There was only one problem. It wasn't my story alone anymore. Oscar was repairing a wooden fence outside the community garden when I found him. He looked up and smiled. "Morning. I think my life just got weird again." He leaned on the hammer. "Again?" I handed him my phone. He quietly read every message. When he looked up, there was genuine pride in his eyes. "You did it." "I don't think I did." "You absolutely did." "No." I shook my head. "I took pictures." "You saw people?" He handed my phone back. "There's a difference." I laughed softly. "You always know what to say." My mom used to say I talked too much. I would have liked her. Oscar smiled. "I know." Around noon, the mayor invited us both to lunch. Every business owner in town seemed to be there. The atmosphere was completely different from a week earlier. People looked hopeful. The owner of the motel stood first. "We're booked for the next 6 weekends." The cafe owner grinned. "I've hired 2 new employees." The bookstore had started stocking local history books because visitors kept asking about Maple Falls. Even the mechanic laughed. "I fixed more flat tires this week than I did all last month." Everyone chuckled. Then the mayor looked at me. "John." I froze. "I know that look." He smiled. "Relax. I've learned that's usually when something embarrassing happens." Oscar tried and failed not to laugh. The mayor folded his hands. "I simply wanted to say thank you." The room became quiet. "Our town isn't famous because of a viral post." He paused. "It's famous because someone reminded us to be proud of who we already were." No one applauded this time. They simply smiled. Somehow, that meant even more. That afternoon, Oscar suggested one last drive before I left. "Last?" He looked at me carefully. "I figured you should see everything." We followed a narrow road through rolling hills until we reached an abandoned fire lookout overlooking miles of forest. The wind was stronger up there, cool, peaceful. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, Oscar broke the silence. "When are you really leaving?" There it was, the question we'd both been avoiding. "I have to go tomorrow." He nodded slowly. "I figured." "My work?" "I know." "My apartment?" "I know." "My clients are wondering where I disappeared to." Oscar smiled. "I know." "But," he looked at me, "but I don't want to leave." The words came out before I could stop them. Oscar didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared across the valley. "You know what scared me?" "What?" "The first day you got here." I frowned. "Why?" "Because I had this strange feeling." "What feeling?" "That meeting you was going to change something." A small laugh escaped me. "I had the same feeling." He turned toward me. "Really?" "I just didn't realize how much." The sun was beginning to set. Golden light stretched across the mountains. Oscar sat on the edge of the old lookout platform. "I've never been very good at saying things." "I've noticed." He laughed. "So I'll just say them." I waited. "When you first walked into Miller's Corner," he smiled to himself, "I thought you'd be gone before dinner." "I almost was." "I'm really glad you weren't." My heart was beating noticeably faster. Oscar looked down for a second before meeting my eyes again. I like being around you, John. I like being around you too. No, he shook his head. I mean, he stopped, trying to find the right words. I smiled. I know what you mean. You do? I nodded. I've been trying not to think about it. And? It didn't work. Oscar laughed quietly. No, it really didn't. For a few seconds, the only sound was the wind. Then I moved a little closer. So? I think I should stop pretending. I think so too. He reached for my hand, slowly, giving me every chance to pull away. I didn't. Our fingers intertwined naturally, comfortably, like they'd already done it 100 times. Oscar smiled. There you are. What? The smile. What about it? I've been hoping I'd be the reason for it. I couldn't help laughing. You probably are. Neither of us rushed anything. We simply sat there, watching the sunset, hand in hand. It felt right. For the first time in a very long time. I wasn't wondering what came next. I was simply grateful for where I was and who I was with. Tomorrow, I'd have to leave Maple Falls. But as I looked at Oscar beside me, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of our story. It was only the beginning. I left Maple Falls the next morning, or at least, that was the plan. Half the town somehow knew what time I was leaving. When I drove toward the town square, I immediately slowed down. People were gathered along both sides of the street. The florist, the mechanic, the bakery staff, the librarian, families I'd photographed, kids waving handmade signs. Even the mayor stood near the fountain. I rolled down my window. What is all this? Mrs. Jenkins smiled. You didn't think we'd let you disappear without saying goodbye, did you? I laughed, though my throat suddenly felt tight. I was hoping to sneak away quietly. Oscar, standing near the front of the crowd, folded his arms. I've learned you're not very good at leaving. I've noticed. The mayor stepped forward. We won't keep you long. He handed me a small wrapped package. No speeches. Thank you. Open it later. I nodded, one by one. People came over. Some shook my hand. Some hugged me. Children handed me drawings they'd made from my photographs. One little boy tugged on my sleeve. You're coming back, right? I smiled. I hope so. You promise? I looked at Oscar, then back at the boy. I promise. The drive out of town felt strangely quiet. The welcome sign slowly disappeared in my rearview mirror. I pulled over at the first scenic overlook. Only then did I open the mayor's gift. Inside was a leather-bound photo album. Every page contained pictures from my week in Maple Falls. Not my photographs. Pictures people had taken of me. Helping decorate the festival. Laughing with children. Talking with shop owners. Sitting beside Oscar during the fireworks. On the final page, everyone in town had signed their names. At the bottom, written in neat handwriting, was a single sentence. You'll always have a home here. I closed the album. For a long moment, I couldn't start the car again. Life moved fast once I got home. The photo book deal became official. Television interviews followed. Travel magazines wanted articles. My social media audience exploded. Everywhere I went, someone recognized me. You're the Maple Falls photographer? It still felt surreal. One afternoon, my publisher slid a contract across the table. This book is going to do very well. I looked at the cover mock-up, Finding Maple Falls Photographs by John. I smiled. It doesn't really belong to me. What do you mean? It belongs to everyone there. Success came with opportunities, exhibitions, speaking invitations, brand partnerships, the kind of career I'd spent years chasing. But something felt missing. Every evening, no matter how busy I became, I found myself calling Oscar. Sometimes we talked for 10 minutes, sometimes for 2 hours. It became part of my routine. "Busy day?" he'd ask. "You have no idea. You remembered to eat?" Eventually, he laughed. "You still need someone to remind you." "And you?" Tourists asked where the famous photographer had coffee. I smiled. "They're still coming?" Every weekend. The town was thriving. New businesses had opened. The old theater had finally been restored. Even the empty storefront on Main Street now held a small local art gallery. Maple Falls was changing. For the better. 3 months later, I received another invitation. The annual Autumn Harvest Festival. The mayor's message was short. "You promised you'd come back." I didn't even have to think about it. I packed the car the next morning, the moment I reached the town limits. The familiar wooden sign made me smile. "Welcome to Maple Falls this time." It felt like coming home. Oscar was waiting outside Miller's Corner, exactly where we'd first met. He leaned against his truck with the same relaxed smile. "You took your time." "It's only been 3 months." He walked over without saying another word. Then, he wrapped me in a hug. A real one. Neither of us seemed in any hurry to let go. "I missed you," he admitted quietly. I smiled into his shoulder. "I missed you too." When we finally stepped back, he looked at me carefully. "You look different." "Better or worse?" "Happier." "I think I am." The festival was even bigger than before. Visitors filled the streets. Some recognized me immediately. "John, the photographer's back." People waved as we walked through town. But this time, the attention didn't overwhelm me, because Oscar was beside me. Late that evening, we returned to the hill overlooking the valley, the same place where we'd watched the sunset months earlier. Oscar looked unusually nervous. "You okay?" He nodded. "Mostly?" "Mostly?" He reached into his jacket pocket. "I've been carrying this around for 2 weeks." He held up a small silver key. I frowned. "A key? Remember that empty storefront on Main Street? The one beside the bookstore?" He smiled. "It isn't empty anymore." I looked at him. "I don't understand." "It's yours." I blinked. "What?" "I signed the lease." "Oscar?" "I talked to the mayor." He laughed nervously. "The town helped renovate it." My mind completely stopped working. "What are you talking about?" He took a slow breath. "I know your work takes you everywhere." I nodded. "But I also know." He looked directly into my eyes. "Every time we talk, you sound happiest when you're talking about Maple Falls." I couldn't say anything. So, he placed the key in my hand. "I thought maybe," his voice softened, "you'd like a place to come back to." I stared at the key resting in my palm, then at Oscar. "You did all this?" He shrugged shyly. "I had help." I laughed through eyes that suddenly felt suspiciously wet. "You're unbelievable." "I've been called worse." I stepped closer. "You know." "What?" "I think you accidentally trapped me." He smiled. That was kind of the idea. I kissed him. Right there, under the evening sky, with Maple Falls glowing below us. When we finally pulled apart, Oscar rested his forehead against mine. So? You coming home?" I looked toward the lights of the town, then back at him, without hesitation. "Yeah, I think I am." A month later, I officially became a part-time resident of Maple Falls. That sentence still sounded unbelievable every time I said it out loud. The little storefront beside the bookstore had been completely transformed. Large front windows overlooked Main Street. The walls displayed framed photographs from around town. A handmade wooden sign above the entrance read, John's Corner Studio below it, in much smaller letters. Photography. Prints. Stories. I stood on the sidewalk staring at it. Oscar walked up beside me. You still don't believe it's real, do you? I shook my head. Not even a little. He smiled. Good. Good. I like seeing you surprised. Opening day turned into something I never expected. I thought a few neighbors would stop by. Instead, the entire town showed up. Mrs. Jenkins brought homemade cookies. The bakery delivered pastries. The florist filled every empty corner with flowers. The mechanic somehow carried in 3 enormous framed prints by himself. You didn't have to do all this, I said. He shrugged. You would have done it for us. That simple answer hit harder than any speech ever could. Tourists continued arriving every weekend. Many came because of the viral story. Most stayed because they genuinely loved the town. Local businesses flourished. A second cafe opened. The old train station became a small museum. The annual festival doubled in size. One afternoon, I overheard a little girl asking her parents, "Is this the place where everyone became friends?" Her mother smiled. I think that's exactly what happened. The photo book launched in early spring. It became a bestseller. Not because the photographs were extraordinary, but because every page felt honest. People wrote to me from all over the country. Some said the book reminded them to visit their hometown. Others said it convinced them to spend more time with family. One message stayed with me. Thank you for reminding me that success isn't only about getting somewhere bigger. Sometimes it's about noticing what's already beautiful. I read that message 3 times. Then I quietly forwarded it to Oscar. A minute later, my phone buzzed. Oscar, your pictures did that. Me. No. Me. We did. Life settled into a rhythm neither of us had planned. Some weeks I traveled for photography assignments. Other weeks, I stayed in Maple Falls editing photos while Oscar worked around town. People got used to seeing us together. Nobody made a big deal about it. It simply became normal. Saturday mornings meant breakfast at Miller's Corner. Sunday evenings meant walks by the river. Whenever tourists asked for recommendations, Oscar would point toward my studio. I'd point them toward his family's orchard. We quietly became each other's favorite answer. One warm summer evening, almost exactly a year after I first arrived by accident, the town held another Founders Festival. This time, I wasn't the guest. I was one of the organizers. Watching children run through the square, I smiled as memories flooded back. The upside-down banner, the emergency posters, the surprise speech. Everything had started there. Oscar walked over carrying 2 lemonades. You've got that look again. What look? The one where you're remembering everything. I laughed. Is it that obvious? To me. We sat on the fountain where we'd shared our first long conversation. So, Oscar said. So? Any regrets? I looked around, families laughing, music filling the air. Friends greeting one another by name. The little boy I'd taught to use my camera, now proudly taking pictures of his own. The mayor dancing terribly with his wife. Mrs. Jenkins pretending not to cry during another community speech. Then I looked at Oscar, the man who'd changed my life without ever trying to. My GPS breaking? He grinned. Yeah. Best mistake I ever made. He reached for my hand. I was hoping you'd say that. As darkness settled over Maple Falls, fireworks once again lit the sky, just like the first night. Only this time, I wasn't standing there wondering whether I belonged. I already knew. The mayor stepped onto the stage for the closing speech. He smiled toward the crowd before his eyes found me. A year ago, he began. A stranger accidentally found our town. People laughed softly. But somewhere along the way, he looked toward Oscar and me. He stopped being a stranger. Applause echoed across the square. I squeezed Oscar's hand. He squeezed mine back. The mayor raised his glass. To Maple Falls. The crowd answered together. To Maple Falls. Fireworks exploded overhead. Gold, blue, silver. I smiled up at the night sky. I had set out searching for the perfect photograph. Instead, I found a home. I found a community. And when I least expected it, I found love. Funny how life works. Sometimes you spend years chasing the perfect destination. Then, one wrong turn changes everything.